Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Malrius's Musings. This is Malrius coming at you with episode 6 of the show, Religion v. Spirituality. So yeah, for the main event tonight, we're going to be discussing, comparing, contrasting the concepts of religion and the concept of being spirituality. But yeah, I hope that I hope this episode is finding everybody well today. We're taking it a little easier right now, and we're going to be expanding the show more, or I'm going to be expanding the show more. So wanted to make it more of a variety show. So I've got some segments that we're going to hit on before we get to the main event tonight. We've got Malrius's Media Madness. I almost wanted to call it Malrius's Movie Madness, but I don't think I'm going to be sticking just to movies. So, media includes any kind of entertainment of that kind, shows, movies, or even video games. And then we've got some tarot time. Got a divination corner we want to have in our show, and then maybe throw on a Mary Jane strain review, and then finally get us to the main course of the main topic for this episode. But yeah, just coming on first to say hi and let everybody know where we're going here, because this show is going to be a little bit different than the last one, and going to take a little break, and we will come back and start the media madness, I suppose. And now it is time for Malrius Media Madness. And talk about some of the entertainment I've been looking at recently. I'm not going to call myself a movie reviewer, but I know a little bit about film theory and whatnot. So, but it is something to talk about, something I like to share. And this channel, if nothing else, is a place for me to just let my voice be heard into the world. But no, I got a couple things that I'm watching. Probably the most current thing that I'm watching would be Spider-Noir. And as time goes on, we'll go into why I don't really watch Marvel movies or anything Disney, really, for that matter, anymore. But this really caught my attention, and I like the idea of it. At least in the first, I'm like on episode 2 or 3. Watching it in black and white, of course. It's everything that I wanted it to be. I like detective noir stories. I like Spider-Man. I used to be a Spider-Man fan back in the day. Part of one of the things I liked about Spider-Man was his Spidey sense, which, at least in the first couple episodes, has kind of taken more of a forefront role in Spider-Noir. Like, you're getting more than anything else, you're getting his Spidey sense. And I really like that, especially how it fits with being a detective. You get those hunches, and then you add the spider sense on top of that. So I'm really enjoying that. And so far in the first couple episodes, and yes, I have seen him, with the suit. We all know he's going to put the suit back on. That's not a spoiler. But even seeing him do the suit, like, he looks a little powered down. And I'm not talking nerfed. I'm talking about he's not super, he's powerful, but he's not super OP, which I'm enjoying that. I don't know if, as he gets back into the Spider-Noir role, the character, Ben Reilly, I don't know if he's going to get stronger. But there was something me and my buddy were talking about the other day on the phone. We were talking about power creep. And power creep is something, like, you're seeing it more and more now. It happens inside of universes, but it also happens across universes. because and the power creep is like you see somebody do something powerful, and then in order to impress the audience again, you've got to raise the standard again and again and again. I hear tell about people complaining about this in John Wick, where in the first movie, I mean, he's amazing. He looks overpowered. So what happens when you're like 5 movies in and you keep on having to top that? It gets to a point where it's no longer believable. It's hard to, your suspension of disbelief, or even if you can keep that within your suspension of disbelief, you're losing tension in the story because who the hell could beat this person, you know? So power creep is a thing that I think that people are dealing with right now. Um, One of my biggest complaints about episode 9 was that we were no longer dealing with the Force, we were dealing with Disney magic. The moment I saw them healing people the way they were, and the Emperor pulling Force lightning from the whole damned universe, I was like, this isn't the Force. This isn't what the Force does. This isn't how the Force operates. And any classic Star Wars fan who's been following the franchise since it started knows that, because it's just nobody had to sit and tell you. You just kind of instinctually knew from watching the movies what you were capable of and not capable of with the Force, you know. And I even went through a time when I was a teenager. Of course, you're young, so you're not thinking things. You're just going with what you like. Where I wanted to see people have more of a regenerative ability with the Force, and people are like, yeah, but if you do that, then it kind of ruins the whole Darth Vader thing now, doesn't it? And I'm like, and I got a lot of pushback, back in the day, because I was trying to make, and again, I was young and I was just trying to be creative, but at the time, and again, being a kid, being like 15 years old, thinking of this, it wasn't as an adult. I wasn't writing a script. I was just a kid who wanted to see the world do what I wanted, but I got pushback. And I'm saying that in a positive. I got pushback because the other people in the community was like, no, 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 you can't do that. And they explained it to me why. And I was like, okay. And I accepted it, especially in a world where you can replace somebody's limb with cybernetics. But that just goes to show you is that that's what I thought of as an immature creator, but that didn't mean that, I should have went forward with it. And I'm not going to go down the deep road of, like what is the rule? I can't remember who said it, but the rule of magic in your stories is your magic has to make sense with the system that you've put in. Otherwise, you're going to throw off your reader, and it's going to look like Disney magic. We can just manifest whatever we want, and then that takes all the tension out of your story and any believability. So I like how Spider Noir has started, because I feel like it, at least in the first couple episodes, they've mitigated some of the power creep to where he's powerful in this world, but he's not without vulnerability. And they just so happen to accent my favorite Spider-Man ability. So yeah, that's Spider Noir. Obviously I don't want to say any spoilers, and how many spoilers do I have when I'm only 3 episodes in, but I did want to make a mention of it. And the other thing I wanted to make a mention of before I can go into my main review for today was Beetlejuice 2. And that's, this movie's a couple years old. Everything that's been said about it has probably been said about it on the internet. I'm not trying to come out with anything new. I'm just saying, hey, I finally watched it and I enjoyed it. But I don't have much else to say beyond that. It was good. It was what I expected it to be, and I enjoyed it. It brought back a lot of memories from the first movie, because, like, when I was a kid, like, I even watched the cartoon growing up. So, there was a lot of memories of Beetlejuice when I was a kid. But what that leads me to here, my today's review, which probably nobody's going to be interested in, is a movie called Lured from 1947. And you may think, why are you reviewing a movie from 1947? And the answer to that is that over the last few years, for many reasons, some I understand, some that I don't, I had basically stopped watching stuff, except for YouTube. I would watch a lot of YouTube, but I wasn't watching a lot of movies or shows. Even shows that I was watching, I just basically stopped watching. There's a couple of really good series out there that I literally was halfway through and just never went back and finished. And I kind of missed it, even though I'm trying to get other things moving in my life. I'm like, I do when I'm relaxing. I did enjoy having that as a part of it, and it seems like I can't carry on a conversation with anybody anymore because I don't watch stuff, and everybody watches stuff, something. So I thought, well, let me try to get back into it. But there's one of the things about movies today is that like most movies that come out today, I'm not interested in. Most movies from the last decade, I'm not interested in. Um, and I'm not saying that everything's all bad. I'm just saying I don't like it. Uh, but I do need to try to make an effort to watch some of the newer things, especially if I'm going to be commenting on it on YouTube. Maybe if I pick some more relevant titles, I'd get more views. But that's neither here nor there at the moment. Um, I wanted to I wanted to find a way to explore both, to explore movies from the past that I haven't gotten to yet from before my time. I wanted to revisit movies that I watched during my time. Even, there were some movies that I watched during my time that were before my time, but, they were part of my world growing up from when I was born till now. And there's a lot of things from the last 20 years that I just, like, hey, I need to get caught up with what's going on with media. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to find a way to randomize a year, and then I'll take that year and I'll find something out of that year to watch. And so that's how I ended up with 1947. But I'm trying to stay more to the sci-fi, horror, and fantasy genres. Um, and I'm basically making my searches from, or my randomizations from, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, which is like the first full-length horror movie to now. And the closest thing that I could find that I could access on streaming, I mean, that's another part too. It can't be some title I got to go, buy, unless it's something that, warrants that. But, the, out of what was available at the time, I saw this quaint little movie called Lured with Lucille Ball in a serial killer movie. This is a serial killer movie, only it wasn't called a serial killer movie at the time. It was referred, the bad guy is referred to as a homicidal maniac. That's what they used to call him, a homicidal maniac, because they didn't have the understanding that we have now. Hell, they didn't have the understanding that we had in the '80s about these things, or at least not public knowledge. I think people at FBI understood, but that wasn't common knowledge yet. Anyways, so directed by Douglas Sirk, who has a list of movies, but I'm not super familiar with. But there's a lot of faces in this movie that I recognize. Lucille Ball. You got George Sanders, who's a big actor. I'm not how to put this. There's a lot of George Sanders movies that I'm familiar with but haven't watched. So he's a big actor, but I don't have that much experience with watching him. But you've got Boris Karloff makes an appearance. He does a great job, and Cedric Hardwicke is in it, who I recognize from Ten Commandments and from the Universal monster movies. I think The Mummy in particular. So my basic thoughts about it were, it's a good movie. It's dated. It's definitely dated. You got the whole you got the main hero and the damsel in distress, and even to the point where we use her as bait. I'll get to that in a second, though. But it had some good shots. Um, you could see that cinematically, it was well done. So for as a movie, if you go back to that era, a lot of stories were kind of simple, and even though everything kind of had a different skin on it, so to speak, a lot of the stories were very similar. I mean, all stories are similar, but I mean, these were really kind of basic. You had your hero character. You had and he has to protect the female character, and there's a bad guy after the female character, and he's probably going to tie her to the railroad track if the memes are and the tropes are anywhat accurate, whether symbolically or literally, she's going to get pinned down to the railroad track with the train coming, as it were, and the hero's got to come and save her at the last minute, all that kind of thing. Um, and it's interesting that I'm watching this, and I'm watching this as a serial killer movie, and I'm going like, man, they really the public really didn't understand what motivated these people. And it's funny now because they'll do movies now on serial killers, and everybody complains. We spend so much time focusing on the villain, and we don't spend as much time focusing on the victim. Well, I think some of that has to do with the fact that we are exploring a psychology that interests us, which we didn't know before. Because this is a serial killer movie, and we didn't have that understanding, or at least the common public didn't have the understanding of what motivates these killers. So the whole movie actually does focus on the victims and the people trying to catch the bad guy. And a lot of those movies were like that back then, especially if it was like a mystery and the main bad guy is held off to the end, which was kind of clever in this movie because and I don't want to spoil it, but there's so many big names. I'm like, okay, which one is it? Because they tease you with all of them. And I don't want to give away who's the actual killer at the end, but there's a little bit of a mystery. Well, in order to keep that mystery from the audience, you also have to not spend too much time with the killer. And so I just think it's an interesting dynamic that, when we didn't know as much about serial killing, we actually did spend more time on focusing on everything around it. And a lot of things, like, because you lived in a time when, from like the late 1800s, with the Victorianism coming into the 1900s and World War One and Two, you come into that time and people, you know, it's like you can read horror fiction from the 1800s and you don't get to see the carnage, but you see the aftermath. Just like in these old black and whites, you don't see the blood. The guy just fires the gun, and a guy fires a gun, and the other guy just kind of grasps at his chest, but you don't actually see any blood, and he just kind of moans and falls dead. It's very quaint. But they weren't trying to focus on the gruesome side of the story. The focus was on all of the characters dealing with it. So I don't know, I've kind of rambled a bit, but this is my channel, The Musing, so I guess the whole point is to ramble a bit. But I recommend it. I really do. If you're into that kind of thing, if you are a true fan of cinema. There's a lot of people out there that like movies, but to me, a person who's a true fan of cinema, as an art form, not just that there's movies that they want to watch, but that if you enjoy filmmaking as an art form, to where you can sit and watch a movie that's almost 100 years old, or even 100 years old, and appreciate what went into it at the time. Just like people who are into art can still go back and look at the Mona Lisa, you're viewing it for what it was at the time. You don't put it down because the Mona Lisa wasn't done digitally. And so whatever imperfections are there. Um, and it is dated. You're going to be watching it, and you're going to going, some of these decisions don't make sense. I will give this away. It's one of those movies where they want the damsel of the movie, Lucille Ball, the damsel character, to help out and be bait. They even tell her that she's going to be bait, and they deputize her to this end. And that was kind of a trope that you saw in old movies like that. We're going to deputize you for this mission. And it's like the person has no friggin' training in law enforcement, and you're really just using them as a bait anyways. Of course, through the course of the movie, they prove their own worth by bringing some kind of skill to the table that helps at the end. That usually happens, but yeah, it's like those decisions wouldn't really make sense in the real world. But we do it to serve the plot and move it along quicker because we've only got like an hour and a half to do this in. Excuse me. So, anyways, that's the media for the day. I'm gonna watch more Spider Noir coming up, but I'm curious to see what the next random year is. And on that note, that's pretty much going to tie up that part of the episode. The media madness, my reviews, and we'll be back after a quick break and do tarot time. And now we're back with the tarot time of episode 6 of the show. Tarot time, the divination corner. I'm going to pull some cards today. I'm going to go with cards today. I have different forms. I do tea readings, crystal ball, multiple things, but we're going to call it tarot time in general, and today we're throwing cards. But before we get into the cards, I recently came across some bad news. I say news, it's actually a couple years old, but so like some of you out there, when I had my introduction to tarot, it was partially through, or at least initially through YouTube videos. And then after that, I went out and I got some books. And while I was doing my research, while I was watching videos and reading books, I came across a reader out of Chicago named Vincent Petici. And he probably has had the biggest influence on how I read. Everybody reads differently, but I liked the way that Petici broke everything down. I've bought most of his books. He's got Bare Bones Tarot. What else we got here? Radical Tarot, Breaking the Rules. I don't have Roadhouse Reader. I'm gonna have to grab that. Conversations with the Tarot. That's a really interesting one. Tarot Maps. What else? Stray Tarot. Genius of the Tarot. The Essential Tarot. He had a number of books. And some of them a little bit repetitive, but each one of them did kind of have their own little twist, so that's why I grabbed multiple of them. Stray Tarot actually has more to do with getting into the business side of things, but needless to say, he had a huge influence on me, and I had always meant to schedule some time with him, but I kept putting it off, and I probably came across him about 3 years ago. And I didn't realize that about 2 years ago, he passed away. So I found that out recently. I found that out very recently. So, yeah. I recommend him. Let's keep his memory alive. I mean, I don't know much about the man. I heard he was a nice guy. But yeah, there you go. And he was a big fan of the Marseille deck, and he actually influenced me to do the Marseille deck. I always find these strange off the beaten path teachers. Like when I started guitar, I was when I started blues guitar or like lead guitar, I was influenced by Mick Mars, and here I got Petici, and I guess Marseille is to Petici what D standard tuning is to Mick Mars, that and the blues scale. So the tools that they decided to use. So I've got this one Marseille deck. I have two Marseille decks. One is one I more often use. This is the more nice. This is a nice one. This one's by Cerebro, which is, in my opinion, one of the nicest card companies. Lo Cerebro, an Italian operation. I have a couple decks of theirs. They all look very nice. But in honor of old Vincent Petici, today's drawing is going to be under a Marseille deck. I've been trying to use my deck more, the one that I designed. But I do really love the Marseille deck. There's a video on here about that. This is the first time I've ever used this particular deck, so I'm kind of doing the first shuffle. But yeah, old Vincent, he had a lot of good books. I like the way he mapped it out. He talked about, interpreting the minor arcana cards in a cycle, and he's not the only one to say that, but he used that a lot, the numbers, of the minor cards, the ones, the ace through tens, and you have your core cards. And he also he would do like meaning maps with his cards. So like if you read his books, like he doesn't just say, oh, a lot of times they'll just say, hey, this is what the card, these are all the meanings of the card, and they'll have a picture of the card. In Vincent's books, like the idea is he starts with the concept, right? And then all these meanings link conceptually to that main concept. And then you just kind of, what would you say? You make your associations. You make your associations that way, for the meanings in the cards. And it would be like a map of meaning, and they all kind of interacted, which makes sense once you see it, how he would lay it out. And of course, you can personalize it. His thing wasn't like do it just like this, or use these particular meanings. He was saying, this is how I simplified getting to know the card. And you gotta throw cards to learn the cards. You can't just memorize it. You have to see how they play out. And then the meanings become more. Forgive me for rambling, but I have to. I'm shuffling this deck, and it's taking a little more. So I thought I'd continue talking about old Vincent. And the other thing that he talked about was conceptual blending. And that's something that I've heard him talk about that I really haven't heard a lot of other people talk about. And that was his practical explanation of tarot. The idea that when your spread is basically how you break down your question. And, the cards represent keys to those parts. And if you take like when you throw a random concept at a question, that causes you to think outside of the box. And then you think of solutions that you hadn't thought of before. I'm really oversimplifying it, because you can always go to his channel, Tarot Maps, because it's still up. Or you could order his books through Amazon. I'm not trying to, show for him, but we just had a jumper. I was shuffling and that card fell out. So maybe it's time we'll keep that card and get ready to do the draw. Now I want you to think about your question, I'm going to do a Celtic cross here. I want you to think about your question. And this may not be for you. This drawing may not be for you. But I believe it will be for some people that come across them. All right, so the first card we have, you in your position, declarant, card 1, 4 of Wands. The 4 of Wands. right? And then what crosses it? The King of Swords. Roi d'épée. And then, interesting. Heaven above. King of Wands. I believe that's the King of Wands. Yes, that would be the King of Wands. Roi de Bâton. Belith. La Lune. The Moon. To the left. The Nine of Swords. And to the right. Jupiter. Or the Hierophant, if you will. It's the 5. Now we move on to our staff. Set that off to the side. The bottom card, the Hermit. It's your attitude. Your environment. 2 of coins. And hopes and fears. The Wheel of Fortune. Likely outcome. The Knight of Cups. Cavalier de Coups. So here's what I see looking at these cards as I'm looking at them. You have some hidden things deep down. This is from the underneath card of the center of the cross. It's the Moon. Things hidden, things revealed. I think there's maybe some deep motivations that you may or may not be subconsciously aware of. But the center, the querent, where you are in the situation, the 4 of Wands, trying to hold on to the stability. Wands have to do with your passions. I always call it fire and desire, and 4s are stability. So you're trying to hold on to that stability, and above you, or the top side, the King of Wands, you're not being unsuccessful. You're holding your own because you're being crossed by the King of Thoughts. So it's like you're trying to follow your passions, but your head may be getting in the way. And by the way, I think this one's just going to be some simple guidance on this one. I'm not saying some earth shakiness, just some guidance for a situation where you're trying to follow your heart and your head, maybe you getting in the way. But to the left, what is behind, the 9 of Swords, and the nine of Swords, in this situation, in this question, gives some thought to, hey, you've been here before. You've recently learned some new strategies to keep your mind focused. And you can draw upon that, on the things that you've learned to keep your mind focused, so that your mind isn't your enemy, but you can't let it cross you when you're trying to do what you're trying to do. It's supposed to be your guide, not your tyrant. But what I see moving forward, the Hierophant card, but in this deck, the Jupiter, and this has to do with some stability, yes. What's the word? Not foundation so much, but a structure in your life. It may be time to look back on some of the the basic foundational things that you learned when you were younger. Um, those might be the things that move you forward, or it may mean that you're coming into a time of stability and coming into a place of coming back to yourself and your foundation. On the staff in the bottom selection, I see the Hermit. You may find yourself alone in your pursuits right now. And the environment is one of balance, though. Just like the first card, the main card, the Querent card, the Four of Wands, there's a stability in the Two of Coins. It is the two things being balanced, one in each hand, expertly. Um, Twos can often mean decisions, but I see a balance there. And the hopes and dreams and the fears are wrapped up in the Wheel of Fortune. You're hoping that things go well with you. But at the same time, I think looking to the final card, the outcome, the Cavalier de Coups, the Knight of Cups, action. Knights are action, momentum, motion, and the cups can have to do with your spirit, with the emotional side of your spirit. Um, to fill up your cup, I think, is also going to be important here. I haven't seen really any cups in the whole drawing except for right at the end there. So I think there's something to be said of refilling your cup, or this process of what you're being will refill your cup. Whether or not you get the Wheel of Fortune, I think that's what you're going to gain internally is going to outweigh that. That doesn't mean that you won't gain on the outside, but you might find that the greater increase is the one that happens on the inside. So, and if anything else jumps out at you from this meeting, of course, take it to heart. I'm just reading through what I see, and not everyone reads the same. I think this is just a simple one. I think when I step back and take a look, I think it's just very simply, you're trying to pursue some things from deep down inside. Your mind's fighting a little bit, but recently you've learned some things to help you to keep your mind corralled as you follow your dream or whatever it is you're following. It may not be your dream, but just whatever the thing you're pursuing at the moment. I think you're going to come into a place of stability. I think you're going to come into a place of inner refreshment. But you might be alone in your pursuit for a while. And but I see you're in a place of balance. So just, continue on and have some faith in yourself and know that you'll get there. And you've got things going for you on the left hand and on the right. And I think that's going to pretty much wrap it up for the tarot time for this episode of the show. We'll be coming back with a Mary Jane Strain review, and after that, the main topic of the episode. And I'm back, Malrius, with the next portion of our show, that Mary Jane Strain review, which, if any of you know the history of the channel, it used to be its own show. I just want to incorporate it in here. I've come to learn that you don't really need a 20-minute episode on a weed strain. I started off with a lot of ground, and I'll be honest with you, I did that on purpose. I know a lot of my early stuff was on ground flower. And the reason for that is I was like, okay, I'm still trying to find my legs. I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't want to I want to save the good ones for later, But I've come to find there's a lot of flower out there to try, and I like those episodes. Don't get me wrong, but I'm probably not going to be doing much ground anymore now that I feel like I'm getting my stride. But anyways, today's review is going to be on Baby Turtle by Khalifa. and it's a strain of according to the website, it's a strain. It's a cross between their Khalifa Kush and I think it's a Joker's 81. Maybe is what they said. 31. Joker's 31. According to the, I'm not going to read all what they say on the site. Oh, by the way, the Joker's 31 Fino right runs by Jet Fuel Gelato, crossed with the Khalifa. Uh, pers- Personally, I'm not necessarily, personally, I'm not really sold on their description of the taste. I mean, it may be the flavor, but that's not what I pick up. I just get more of a florally, is more flowery, I guess you will, is more of that kind of a taste. Um, Kind of a little sweet, mellow flavor. As far as the effects, it's a solid indica. I always would tell people it gave me a feeling like like I was a baby turtle chilling in my shell, just chilled out. And it's a definitely end of the day smoke. I recommend it. I like it. I don't know if it's my favorite Khalifa flower. Um, I'm rather fond of the Khalifa mints, to be honest with you, but Baby Turtle's up there too. Um, and of course, Violet Sky is probably, I don't know, Violet Sky is up there. But yeah, it's definitely a solid chill smoke. I don't find it to get me too spacey, and a lot of times when I'm smoking an indica, I want to kind of be a little spaced out. I don't quite get that from Baby Turtle as much. I'm not saying it's not there, but I don't get it as much. But it's definitely, like I said, I feel like a baby turtle, just chilling in my shell with my little Nintendo in there or whatever. I'm just chilling, and all safe and secure and snuggled in your little shell there. And I think that's a good name association that I have with it. It is something that I would recommend. I've always enjoyed it, and this isn't just from a particular strain. I've smoked this on multiple strains, and I just found it to be a solid go to for me. Um, but yeah, that's what I have to say about Baby Turtle. I would recommend it. I was thinking about like what would I pair it with, and I think this is one, like, I wouldn't want to put jazz on with this. I think this is like a really end of the day smoke. You're getting ready to tuck her in for the night. Um, put on some kind of soundscape, like maybe maybe like a pirate ship on the 10 hours, YouTube 10 hours of a pirate ship on the ocean with rain, something like that, with the creaky ship and the lightning and something like that, I think would go well. Or one of these 10 hours of radio chatter on a space station. That's one of the ones I've been listening to lately. I think that would be something as far as audio accompaniment. I would go with something like that and more of a preparing yourself for bed. So maybe pair it with like a chamomile if you want something to drink with it, or maybe just a nightcap. Um, but yeah, that's the long and the short of that one. And no reason to draw this out too much longer. Okay, we'll be coming back in just a minute for the main course of the evening, the main topic for the episode. We'll be getting into that next. And we are back for the final main portion of the episode 6 of the show Religion v Spirituality. And I'm going to be approaching this one more as Cerebro than Malrius tonight, or at this portion of the episode, because it relates more to that side of myself, a little more serious, a little more introspective, and what have you. But I thought a lot about how to approach the topic and where to start from, and I wanted to talk about my own story, my own history a little bit, and but I also thought like maybe a good place there's a scripture in Galatians that I always liked, and I think that would be a good place to start. Not to turn this into a sermon. It does make a point though for me. And Galatians 3:24-27 says, "Therefore the law was our schoolmaster to bring us into Christ, that we might be justified by faith. But after that faith has come, we are no longer under a schoolmaster. For ye are all the children of God by faith in Christ Jesus. For as many of you as have been baptized into Christ have put on Christ." And so there's a lot of things you can take out of that scripture and talk about, but the reason that I bring it up for this topic is that like Paul's trying to say here that you know you go through this time where you're adhering to the law, because the law does teach you, it gives you a foundation, and it gives you some kind of moral compass to start with. Um, and then he talks about, but you come to a place though when you're walking in faith where you start to operate, you start to go beyond that, you start to walk in grace. And I'm not talking about forsaking all the things that you learn in your structure. That's the last thing you want to do. I mean, you don't want to undermine your own building, by knocking out your own foundation. That's not quite the point. But you learn like a freedom. Like one way I was thinking about it today is a lot of times in jobs now, you go to a job and they have like this video based training and all the stuff that you got to read that tells you the job. And it's all the things so that they can say, okay, well, we told you everything, right? But when you actually get to doing the job, it doesn't always play out the same like it did on the video that you watched. And that doesn't mean that you're breaking the rules, but you have to find a way to implement the things that you've learned. And in some cases, you do have to kind of go, out. You have to think outside of the box. Um, One of the other things that it makes me think of too is when and this isn't just Bruce Lee. I believe this goes into Taoism. I believe it is, but Bruce Lee's the one who I first heard it from, where the idea is that you use a boat to get across the river, and then when you get to the other side of the river, you don't carry the boat with you. You leave the boat there and you keep going, but you realize that you couldn't have gotten to where you are without the boat. And so this is when I start to say, religion versus spirituality. Um, it really is a Venn diagram, because you can't have religion without it touching your spirituality, without it touching your spirit, and you can't, or it's difficult to have any kind of spiritual walk without some kind of basis to go off of. Um, and that doesn't mean that these two are enemies, because there's a huge crossover. But there are things that I learned from my study, and then my actual walk, implementing that, and then growing beyond that, um, and studying more and being challenged and being exposed to certain people like Jung and things like that. Um, you see, religion has a lot to do with what do I believe? What does someone believe? And what is their mythology is, if you will. And the reason I use the word mythology is not to paint these things as being make believe. No, rather, when you go across the different peoples of the world and you look at their mythologies, the mythologies did a couple things for them. It explained the world to them, so they had somewhere to kind of plant their feet. but it also emulated certain, it conveyed certain concepts that were valued in those societies. So it's like, whether or not you want to take Genesis 1 through 3 literally or not, it still signals how we should, certain like concepts of redemption and sin and things that play out through the entire Bible, really, and particularly the Old Testament and in Genesis, these themes that are set up early. And it spoke both to ground everyone into the world with the best understanding that they had at the time, to give them a kind of a, okay, this is, here's you, here's your gods, because I'm talking about all cultures, but in the case of Genesis, here's you, here's God, and bada boom, bada bing. But it also has with it like lessons of how you're supposed to live, and that's what makes the myth, is that it's not just information of origin, it's information of operation, how you're supposed to conduct yourself in the society. And so that's religion. Religion is your foundation, But religion is conservative. Religion is conservative. And by conservative, I'm not talking about politically conservative, although you can apply it to that. But I mean conservative in the sense of it seeks to protect. It seeks to, don't go beyond these walls. Don't go beyond these lines. Outside of this is where the danger lies. Don't, you even see this wording in the Old Testament law. There were sins and there were things that were called transgressions. And the word literally meant to pass a border. So there was activities that were called like, hey, you're crossing a line. And so religion always comes with that. Like, these are the lines that you have to stay in. And sometimes when we're pursuing spirituality, we have to let some of those lines go. Now, I'm not talking about thou shalt not kill. I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is, remember when we went into grace, we let go of the law. And that didn't mean that we let go of our morals, but also understanding what the law was for the Old Testament. And it was something that just had come to a place of, it's like, okay, this is the word of God, but we can't even physically do this anymore. Like, even those who didn't convert to Christianity and stayed with Judaism, around 70 AD, the Second Temple was destroyed, and you just literally could not fulfill the things that you were supposed to fulfill. So they had to change the rules up a bit. They had to, in order to pursue their spirituality, they had to make some concessions on the rules while still maintaining their relationship with their God, But spirituality, I see, like, whereas religion is more of what you believe, spirituality is what you've done, what you've experienced, what's happened to you in the spiritual realm, in your spiritual interaction. And I look at that as that whole thing is a separate thing. Because it's one thing to believe a thing, and it's another thing to act it out. And it's a completely different experience. And I'm not saying that the people that don't act it out don't believe. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that some of us aren't, like, not everybody wants to, like, experience the other side from this side like some of us do. If you're, like the other channel, the one that I've kind of melded with this one, but the one that's Cerebro, myself, this part of me, Cerebro, is the Society of Esoteric Christians, Then, we've talked about witchcraft a little bit on this show, but, I was talking to my buddy the other day, along with the other thing we were talking about, with power creep. And I was saying, I don't really consider myself a witch, although, just because I throw tarot cards, for reasons, but I could see where someone could call me a Christian mystic. And the reason why I say Christian mystic is, understand that the word mystic doesn't mean necessarily magician. A mystic is someone who does things that seeks to align themselves with the divine, and to the point where it has a tangible effect in their life. And you're when we talk about like my own story, I was baptized in the Holy Ghost, if anybody out there knows what that is. But I was having spiritual manifestation happen. I was 3 when it first happened. And there was things that would happen back in those days that I would be a part of and see, and I was opened up to at a very, very young age. So from the very beginning, I was somebody who, I had a taste for interacting with it at a very young age. But of course, I thought that the way to fulfill that was to pursue your religion, because I was young and I didn't have the understanding that I have now. But I definitely see like the spirituality is more as the things you do. And, like, religion is community, it's doctrine, it's ritual, it's tradition. Um, Spirituality is well, you know what? I would even take the ritual into spirituality. There's a religious side to ritual and there's a spiritual side to ritual. I think it all depends on what your intention is when you do it. But spirituality has, mystical experience, prayers, dreams, visions, revelations, sensing the divine presence, inner transformations. And that was classically, even when I was very religious, I was very spiritual. And I'm not saying that to boast, because there's a lot of people like that out there. I'm saying that not to stand out, but so that those of you who will resonate with what I'm saying, because you're out there too, you like to experience the thing. You're not afraid to touch the other realm. But as we explore that, even if you want to, like, if you were, and I know not everybody who listens to this is always going to be a Christian, but if you are a Christian, like, there's a way to explore those things while still maintaining, okay, the only name I'm going to pray in is Jesus. I'm not going to talk to other gods. You could take that attitude with this thing, but you're still going to be, you can still, at least like in my case, potentially touch things that isn't acceptable by the rest of the group. But they're not walking in the plane of spirituality that you are at the same time, you know. Um, and so, like I said, sometimes when if the rules get in the way of you growing, you remember what Jesus said. When Jesus came, there was a place of, okay, guys, Jesus says, I'm coming with a new way. And with that comes a new law. And so the old law passed away. And because he said, no, I'm updating everything. Um, so, and you do run into, if we only pursue spirituality and we have no religious foundation, we do risk getting caught up in cults, and we can get caught up in a lot of things. And if you believe in the spiritual realm, if you have no basis to start from, oh, how easy it is. There's a lot of spirits on the other side. Oh, how easy it is to get in contact with the wrong one if you have no protective basis to start from. So, they both work hand in hand. But it's one of those things where religion is easy. You can just go to church or synagogue or temple, or um, whatever it is your pursuit is, whatever it is your path is. You go to that place and everybody's doing it together, and there's a guy up there that tells you what you're supposed to know, and he's supposed to tells you what you're supposed to do, and you're all following it together. And and so in that sense, it can be very easy because it's all on the people who are administering. Unless you're going into the religious life, if you're just going there to get the foundation, not to be the one that gives other people their foundation, like a minister of some kind or priest or whatever, or rabbi. But if you're going there to, as a congregation person or part of the assembly, really all you have to do is listen and go along with. That's really all you have to do and they're going to impute into you the knowledge and the traditions, and you're just going to absorb it while you're going along with what everybody else is doing. Whereas spirituality is something that you're going to have to take extra time for. You're going to have to take time out of your day to meditate and to pray, and have the discipline to wake up and write down your dreams and try to interpret them, and study different religious texts and study psychological theorems, and because all of it plays in together, um, and like I said, it's I don't remember the exact quote, but I know that Carl Jung talked about how religion, especially if you let religion just, you're letting religion in the way of making those decisions, right? Jung said about that, he's like, the quickest way to stop yourself from religion is the quickest way to stop yourself from having a spiritual experience. And that's the other side. If you're leaning too heavy on the religious side, and this is something that I run into with people, is I'm exploring my relationship with God. And there's not a thing that I do that I'm not talking to him about. And there's a lot of things that I've dabbled in that he's like, no, I don't want you dabbling in that. And I said, I backed off. It doesn't mean I can, people get the idea I'm just doing whatever I want. That's not what I'm doing. I'm still being guided in what I do. Um, and that's everybody's, whether you want to call it you're being guided, being guided to where you're going, or certain things resound with you and certain things don't, however you want to frame it. But at some point, you have to, especially when your pursuit is to go deeper with God and become a better person, you know, there's certain things you can just circumvent, like, um, like eating without unwashed hands. And you just go, hey. And again, we're not talking about doing things that are flat on immoral. But sometimes you have to step outside of the box. And if you are full on religious, it's hard to do that because again, you are still in the place of, I'm going to come in, let them tell me what to believe, let them tell me what to think, let them tell me what to do. And so when you take that agency into your own hands, at some point you're going to start doing or practicing something that the rest of the group isn't going to be happy with. And you just have to deal with that however you deal with that. For me, a lot of it was like the stuff like the tarot. Christians don't like it when they hear I do tarot. And it's like, but, I have a whole video about why and the whys and the wherefores. But it's like, I'm not hurting anyone. And I'm not taking advantage of anyone. But I've given a lot of people encouragement by doing those things. So, I like to say, I still believe in the baptism of the Holy Ghost. That I still believe in the resurrection and Christ and the Holy Spirit, and Nicene Christianity, if you know what the Council of Nicene is. But not every, not, I like how I put it, not necessarily every denominational fence built around those truths. I like that. I still affirm those things, but there's a lot of denominational fences around those truths that I'm not trying to stay fenced in, as it were. I'm not going to stay fenced in. Oh, there's where I got into Jung stuff. I'm reading over my notes. Yeah, Jung. Religion is often a defense against genuine religious experience. um, because Jung had observed that the institutions become substitutes for transformation. It becomes easier just to come in and let them tell you what to think, what to know, whatever. But confronting your dark side, confronting your dark side and living out those texts, um, you can have some profound experiences if you start to bring it into your life in a very real way, and that's what I consider spirituality. And you see, one of the things for me in my biblical study was I would look at things, and I was always intrigued by things that could be done. You know, again, remember at 3 years old, I was baptized in the Holy Ghost, which was something that it was only 100 years ago. Someone in a Bible study asked, "Is this still possible?" They were looking to see in there what they could make happen in the here and now, to experience that spiritual life, to experience that religious life, not just as a set of rules, or I'm supposed to live a certain way and here's my new community. I mean, yes, there's the change on that level, and religion does that better, because there's where the community is. But I was set up young to interact with spiritual things and to look into that. It was to the point where even I would always be intrigued in like horror. One of the things I loved about horror movies is, especially like in the 70s and early 80s, that there would always be this book. There'd be a book with a page, and the page had this is how you kill a vampire, or this is what makes the werewolf do the werewolf thing. There was always a book with a page in it that had the secret. It wasn't the memorization of the whole book, but somewhere in the book was a key of what you could do. And I was always intrigued by things like the Paul's prayer cloth, where he would, if he couldn't get to somebody to pray with them, he would anoint a cloth and pray over it, and it was supposed to be as if he himself were laying hands on the person right then and there. Or the idea of the visions that the men of God would have, and things that they would see in meditative trances. Or how Moses cleansed the waters of Meribah with cutting down the branch and throwing it in the water. These are all things that I found, from the Bible. It was like, oh wow, there's things that you can do. I was always intrigued with that, but I didn't know how to take that deeper for a long, long time until the more recent years of my life. But like I said, even in my fiction, I always liked to see that kind of a thing. It always intrigued me, um, to see those things play out, especially in the hands of regular people. That here's somebody without any quote unquote powers, but they have this connection. Van Helsing with his cross, and it had an effect in the real world. So that's why I think I was always just more drawn to spirituality, because it was something you could do. It was something you could see. I've seen people like get prayed for and then get better. So healing is a thing. And then you become frustrated when you go back to the people in the religious life and you try to share what you found with them, and they reject you. And they reject you like they rejected Christ, but they reject you because, one, they don't understand what you've seen, and number two, you had to bend some rules to get there, and they're not so willing to do that. Or maybe you didn't bend some rules. Maybe you bent their rules. It's like the Baptists. There should be no rule in Christianity against speaking in tongues, yet somehow they did. Even though it's something that's found in Scripture, there was a time when the Baptists were like, those people are talking tongues by the devil. If you, especially if you were alive during that time, you remember. I remember when Baptists didn't look too favorably upon Pentecostals. And these are people that are reenacting things that are in the Scriptures, and they're calling it demonic. So, yeah, you come back with this truth, and in their eyes, even if it's not breaking the rules, to them it's breaking the rules. And they just can't have that. It doesn't matter that there's no malice in anything that you're doing. If anything, you're trying to help people. You came back. It's like when you go on the hero's journey, you come back with the magic potion, whatever it is, for the community. And then imagine nobody wants it, though, even though you went through all this trouble to go get it and you want to share it with the rest of the community, because that's just a natural instinct. Goes all the way back to our hunter-gatherer days. Hey, I found some honey. We can all have it, you know? So I think where my big mistake came in when I didn't know how to dissect those things and I didn't have the understanding of like psychology and Jungism that I have today, I was just constantly fighting the powers that be. And I wasn't even doing tarot at the time. I was just more into putting focus on having spiritual experience. And I was even getting pushback from that. But I thought, well, if I just keep trying, if I just get in the right church, if I just preach the right message, if I just touch the right people, they'll see. And yeah, it didn't turn out the way that I thought it would because I didn't appreciate that most people don't want to do that. Even the ones that think that they do, a lot of them really don't. And and again, I don't say that as a criticism. I say that as a criticism to me that I wasn't fully understanding how we're all put together differently and we all have different pursuits. And a lot of times those pursuits are linked to what our purpose is. You know, I'm not saying that they were bad for not pursuing it or you're not bad for not pursuing it. I just didn't realize not everybody's me, even though there's a lot of people like me out there that do want to experience those things. You do want to be more spiritual than religious. And that took me a long time. And that's probably when I kind of just left the church for good. I mean, I still, I haven't left Christ, but I don't go to any churches and I don't really minister at any churches anymore because I realize it's like we're on a different path now, and I want to explore things more and more and share them here where I don't have to answer to anybody. If you don't like it, go find another channel, kind of a thing. Because this is about me expressing. I don't mean that to be rude. I'm just saying I learned to accept that the religious world is going to do what the religious world does. But that made me go, okay, then I just have to go off and do my thing then, And, but anyways, that's, I thought this segment was going to be longer, but that's pretty much the long and the short of it. I think that if you think about what I've said, it kind of covers a lot of things that I wanted to talk about as far as my relationship with the church right now and where I am on my path. I do know that coming up, I want to do an episode on, and this will also be like a main event, more Cerebro than Malrius, how to like interpret all this into like a Jedi path, so to speak. I think that'll be 2 episodes from now. I think the next one might be an evolution one. I want to have a good discussion about evolution and kind of talk about some of my musings there. It's probably not going to be anything you haven't heard elsewhere on the internet, but just kind of me, my version of getting it out there. So with that being said, I will see you all on the flip side. Thank you for listening. And I'm looking forward to giving you another episode of Show as soon as I can. See you on the flip, y'all.